Welcome to Washington. I'm still reporting on the economy. In our last report, we looked at whether reducing national spending was the cure for reducing the national debt. We concluded that most of those who seriously suggest this solution probably don't understand that we can't reduce the national debt under a debt money system because the national debt is our national money.
You must understand that every penny, every dollar we have in circulation is created as an interest-bearing debt.
No, this debt money system has now weighed every nation down with so much debt that the interest payments, mostly to the biggest banks, are sucking the life out of every national economy. And the lack of that precious money is the leading cause of hunger, poverty, and preventable death. 15,000 children will die today from malnutrition, an entirely preventable loss if national interest payments were allowed to be spent at home.
Well, there's no question. Our current money system is in its terminal phases, the way I see it. The math no longer works. We simply have more debt than incomes could ever hope to repay, and so major change is coming.
This system cannot be sustained by economic smoke and mirrors much longer. It is the biggest Ponzi scheme in history, and it's about to crash. The question is, what will be offered to replace it? There are only two alternatives. Number one, gold-backed or any commodity-backed money, which to most people's surprise is still usually debt-based. Or, number two, debt-free, government-issued money where we, the people, have at least some control. So in our next two reports, we'll examine the problem with gold, the most commonly suggested form of commodity-backed money. There are two basic problems with gold. Number one, gold is not as solid as you might imagine. And number two, history has shown that gold money systems don't work, or at least they don't work for advancing the cause of freedom for the average person. In this report, we'll look at just how solid gold is. In our next report, we'll look at the effectiveness of gold money systems throughout history. Contrary to popular myth, gold is not always good as gold. Unfortunately, gold is not impossible to counterfeit. A few weeks ago, the gold world was rocked by rumors that thousands of gold bars sold on the world market had tungsten cores. But gold scandals are nothing new. In 1869, Congressman and then soon-to-be President James Garfield spearheaded a congressional investigation of a gold market scandal. Garfield understood the ability of the very wealthy to manipulate gold money. He investigated the cause of the Black Friday gold market scandal of 1869, when financier Jay Gould and others cornered the gold market, causing wild fluctuations in the price. This is a photograph of the actual quote board from the New York gold trading room, which Garfield introduced as evidence during a congressional investigation the following year. This is Garfield's handwriting. After his inauguration, he slammed the money changers publicly in 1881.
Whoever controls the volume of money in any country is absolute master of all industry and commerce. And when you realize that the entire system is very easily controlled, one way or another, by a few powerful men at the top, you will not have to be told how periods of inflation and depression originate.
Garfield understood, perhaps only coincidentally, however, within a few weeks of making this statement on July 2nd, 1881, President Garfield was assassinated. Garfield understood that a gold money system is still very easy to control at the top. He also understood that it doesn't matter what backs the money. All that matters is who controls its quantity. The United States was on the gold money system at that time and had been since the assassination of Abraham Lincoln 15 years earlier. What was the result? What always happens when the biggest bankers control the quantity of gold: a deep depression. After Garfield's assassination, the depression deepened, leaving the unemployed to face poverty and starvation. Produce was left to rot in the fields. The country was facing poverty amidst plenty because there was insufficient money in circulation to keep the wheels of trade turning. The country sorely needed the sort of liquidity urged by Lincoln and the Greenbackers, but the bankers insisted that allowing the government to print its own money would be dangerously inflationary. That was their argument, but critics called it humbuggery. And it's happened since then. We were on the gold-backed system during the Great Depression of the 1930s. That didn't help us much. I first reported on the Fort Knox gold scandal in 1980 in an article published in the Loudoun Monitor during Ron Paul's first full term in Congress. At the end of World War II, the United States had over 700 million ounces of gold in Fort Knox, then thought to be about 70% of the world's supply. By 1959, gold reserves at Fort Knox had dwindled to less than 558 million ounces, and by 1971, 291 million ounces. Interestingly, 1959 was the year author Ian Fleming published the James Bond novel Goldfinger. Fleming was a highly placed operative in the British intelligence services during World War II.
Who are you?
James Bond.
And the grandson of British financier Robert Fleming, whose merchant bank was later sold to J.P. Morgan Chase in 2000. Could it be that Ian Fleming somehow knew that a real Fort Knox gold robbery was in the works? In the early 1970s, rumors began to swirl that Fort Knox gold had disappeared. Federal law mandates that a complete physical audit of the gold reserves in Fort Knox occur annually. Yet the last one was done in 1957, over 50 years ago. By 1974, sufficient media pressure had been brought to bear so that Mary Brooks, then director of the U.S. Mint, took 6 congressmen and 1 senator on a tour of Fort Knox with a few reporters. They were taken to one of the smallest vaults inside Fort Knox, not the famous Central Core Vault shown in this drawing by Lieutenant General John L. Ryan, the former Fort Knox commanding general. Visitors noticed that the gold in that small vault was strangely orange in color. This would be indicative of a high copper content and not the .995 pure gold known as good delivery gold. Another photo seems to support this theory. Here we see Representative Gene Snyder of Kentucky holding a U.S. postal scale as Representative John B. Conlon of Arizona places a gold bar on it. When you enhance the image, you can see that the scale shows the bar weighing in at 22 1/4 pounds. A normal bar of .995 gold would weigh 28.9 pounds, nearly 30% more. The Secretary of the Treasury tried to explain away this discrepancy by claiming that the scale was a common household scale and was defective. But the photo shows that it was an official postal scale typically accurate to less than 1 ounce. So what does all this mean? Good as gold does not always mean good. Gold markets are and have always been riddled with fraud. To be absolutely sure that gold is not counterfeit, it has to be physically assayed. Can you imagine having to assay your money each time you want to make a transaction? In our next report, we'll look at how gold money systems have worked throughout history. I'm still reporting from Washington on this, the first day of 2010. Good afternoon.